Welcome to City of Keene in Focus. Thanks so much for listening. Good morning and welcome back to City of Keene in Focus. I am Asa Kramer and I am joined by our city manager, Elizabeth Ferland. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning, Asa.
It's been a sec since we've recorded together.
That's true. Becca did a great job on the last podcast for me. Happy to be back.
Yeah. We had someone come up to her and said, "Oh, you have such a voice for radio."
She does. She really does.
Today, we are going to talk about some of the public hearings that happened last night at City Council, including for the budget. There was another public hearing on feather signs, another one on parking. We will talk about some big community events coming up, which is exciting, and some community art. Yeah, so last night was City Council, and it was budget talk.
Yeah. So last night was our budget hearing. It was a long night. We had multiple hearings, a couple of different code changes, and then the budget. There was a lot of people in the room just because we had, all of the department heads here. And then we had people in the audience from different outside agencies that receive funding. So it got a little warm in here. But we made it through. It was only a few comments from the public, and most of them were really focused on those outside agencies and getting additional support for them. The changes in the state budget and the federal funding that goes down to organizations like arts organizations or the community kitchen, the fact that they are facing potential loss of grant revenue is something that they wanted to talk to the council about and see if there was a way to get some additional support. So that was really the majority of the comments last night, but we did go through the entire budget section by section. We're ready for a vote now. So the process is between now and the next meeting, the City Council has until Tuesday before the next meeting to submit potential changes to the budget. So if any City Councilor wants to make a change, they'll submit something to the City Clerk's office and notify the council and the staff in advance of the meeting. And then on the 19th will be the final vote. So a lot of the other items that are related to the budget, such as the salary ordinances and the related bond resolutions, were all tabled so that the budget and all of those items could be voted on at the same time.
Yeah, I thought they did a really thorough overview of each section of the budget. I would encourage people to give that meeting a watch. If you have concerns or questions about the budget, I feel like they did a really good job going through everything. And also I would encourage people to watch the FOP meetings for May, where they really, really dive into the nitty-gritty. So.
Yeah, the FOP meetings are where they really get into the details. During the FOP process, they go department by department and page by page through the book. If anyone is wondering where they can get their hands on that book, it's online. The fiscal 26 budget is available on the city's website in the finance department, and there's an executive summary that talks about the highlighted changes. So the budget is proposing a 2.06% change in the city's tax rate, which will be equal to 28 cents approximately. So that's the estimate right now, the impact from this budget if it is adopted as presented. Now, we are only talking about the city's portion of the budget. I've talked about this before, but the county has their own separate process to adopt their budget as well as the school. It is those three pieces that make up the city's overall tax rate. So we've been going page by page, department by department, reviewing the city's budget, which will impact the city's portion of the tax rate.
And I think that's a really good distinction to make. I think a lot of people see the bottom line of their tax bill, and that's made up of a couple different parts. So I think that's a good clarification to make.
If you do get a chance to take a look at the budget online, check out page 9 of that budget because there's a pretty good breakdown of what drives the city's budget, and it's mostly related to wages. So either additional staffing for the fire department in this case, or just the union contract wages, related benefits. And so on page 9 of the budget book, it shows that of all of the increases in the budget, a very, very small portion, I think it was just over $100,000, is actual operational changes. And that makes sense because we are a service organization, and to provide services, we need the people to do that. And so the primary budget driver is, in fact, the wages. And this year, we've talked a lot about it, but the biggest portion of that is related to the fire department, the hiring of the 4 additional firefighters, which impacted the wage lines of fire, which includes both EMS and fire services, of just under $500,000. So last night, we also had a couple of other public hearings. They were a bit quicker. There was one on feather signs. This is a change to our sign ordinance to allow feather signs in the industrial district. And there are some rules. The senior planner, Mary Bruner, talked about that last night. They can only be up for 30 days at a time, and there are some restrictions. But I think this provides the additional flexibility that the businesses in the industrial district are looking for, and really primarily to advertise for when they have jobs open. And so I think this is a good change. That will go to the PLD committee next for a recommendation, and then back to the City Council for final adoption. And then the other public hearing we had last night was related to single-family parking requirements. Now, we had made a change in parking requirements, a few months back, but we neglected to include the single-family district. So this just puts it back to where it was before. It's a cleanup of an error from the last change. That will also go to the PLD committee. We did have one gentleman come in and talk about this item. He did not feel that we needed any parking requirements for single-family. So I'll be interested to hear what the committee feels about that. There's always pros and cons. If you have no parking requirements and you can develop a property, what happens is they need a place to park, so they will park on the street, and then we often see some conflicts with on-street parking. We're actually going through some of that right now on Court Street in regards to safety, people pulling in and out of driveways, and so it's a difficult balancing act, so I'll be interested to see what happens when it goes back to PLD, and then that will also come back to the full City Council for a vote. Last night, the other thing that happened is we had a time-sensitive item. The Jumanji event is coming up.
That's right.
Yeah. So the Jumanji event, this is the 30th year celebration of the filming of Jumanji, and the Greater Monadnock Collaborative, or our Chamber of Commerce, had been moving that forward with the sponsors of this event. I know that there were a lot of questions about having the right permissions in place, and it's important when we have an event like this, if there's any sort of commercial activity that's tied to it, there's intellectual property rights. The city doesn't typically get in the middle of something like that, because when an event holder applies, it's very clear in their license that they must have those appropriate permissions, and if they don't, that they are ultimately responsible, not the city. But we knew that for Jumanji there was some questions, and so we had reached out to the event sponsors, and they did get us some additional information about their permissions. So it was nice to be able to act on that last night. The council took a vote to suspend the rules of order to act on it, and basically they just transferred the license and the conditions from the license that was approved for the chamber to Brandy Wells and her organization, and so that event is moving forward. And I know there's a lot of people excited about that.
Yeah, I think that'll be a fun one.
We didn't talk a lot about this last night, but I know we're going to talk more about it over the coming months, and that is the 250th Independence Day celebration. The Heritage Commission is interested in doing something in downtown for that on July 4th, 2026. So it's not something that would be in this budget, because July of 2026 is actually in the fiscal 27 budget. We begin our fiscal year. I know it's confusing, but we begin our fiscal year on July 1st. And so the Heritage Commission had submitted a letter talking about their interest for a celebration, and they will be going to committee to talk about that more. And I think what will happen next is they'll meet with the protocol committee and narrow in a little bit more about what exactly they'd like to do, so that we can offer to them some advice and some recommendations in terms of what it would take to close sections of the downtown if that's what they're interested in, and how much that would cost. I expect that they will be looking for some support from the city for this event and to support the city services that will be necessary to hold it. So that will be coming up in the next few months. that conversation will begin to work its way through the process.
Great. We will watch for that. It sounds like it's going to be a really cool event coming up.
The other thing we didn't really talk about last night, but it was an item for more time at the end of the agenda, is a request to install a sculpture at Pat Russell Park. So back when the park was being designed, there is a location at the park that was included for art displays. And we haven't yet talked about what that really means. And we've got this request that wants to place a piece of art in that location. And so now we're doing two things. We're looking at taking that request through the council process. There's a process that was created for all art, whether it be temporary or permanent art. And then also talking about what that might look like for rotating art. So this is a temporary piece of art, and so it wouldn't remain there. And the group is interested in rotating in other pieces of art, and I know other towns and cities have done that successfully. They use the example of Meredith, and so we'll be looking at Meredith's policies and looking at whether or not this is an opportunity for us at Pat Russell Park to have more rotating art.
Very cool.
This has been a very busy week, a lot of meetings. So earlier in the week, we had the Vision 20 Forward meeting. And so this is the presentation about the draft master plan for the city. And it was held at the library, and we had over 100 people attend.
It was so well attended. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I just want to give a lot of credit to the Community Development Department. They have been moving this project forward for the past year. It started around, I think it was January of 2024, and we're getting close to finalizing a master plan. And they've done a great job at finding ways to interact with the community and take input in a lot of different ways. And we had a very engaged group at that meeting this week. And so I'm excited for this plan to come forward for final adoption. The current master plan was created in 2010, and so a lot of things have changed since then. I'm excited to finalize this and begin implementing some of the recommendations and strategies of the plan. One other thing that happens every year is we have what's called a warrant for unlicensed dogs. Now, this is a very old law on the books, but basically what it says is you must have your dog licensed with proof of a rabies vaccination. And so we do get information from the vets. It's required by law that they send us information about the dogs that they see. So if there's a new puppy that's brought into a local vet, they will share that information with us, and then their name will be added to this list. The city clerk's office does a great job of reaching out multiple times to get people to come in and register their dog. But those, for whatever reason, who haven't done it, make it on this list. This list now will go to committee to be reviewed, but there's a fine if you don't register your dog. And so now it's moving forward through the committee process. And usually what happens is people don't really want the fine or their name to be on the list. So maybe they either forgot or maybe they don't have their dog anymore. Oftentimes we have dogs that had been registered in the past, and if they have passed and they don't communicate with us, they're still on the list. And so it's a time that we really spend going through that list and cleaning it up. And by the time we're done, that list becomes a lot smaller. It's important because this law was created to make sure that dogs are vaccinated.
Yeah.
And it's really about a bigger piece of public health. And we've seen that the importance of a vaccination and having this list. If someone unfortunately has a dog bite in the city, that's one of the things that we first look at to see, is that dog up to date on its vaccinations? Because if not, there's an entirely separate process that the person needs to go through. So it is important to have the dogs vaccinated. And so that will be making its way through the council process as well.
So if you have not yet renewed your dog license and your pup needs a update on their rabies vaccination, make sure you get that done.
So next time, I think we should invite the Community Development Director, Paul Andrus. It would be great to have him on here and talk a little bit more about how we will be wrapping up the master plan process and just sort of talk a little bit about what we've been up to on the fourth floor here at City Hall. There's been a lot of changes over the last couple of years, and it would be great to have him in, talk a little bit about that.
That's a great idea. I love that. Also, he is relatively new, so it'd be a good opportunity for him to introduce himself on the podcast.
his experience.
Yeah.
And how's it going?
And how's it going? Right. He's from the Southwest, so he can tell us about his transition to Keene.
Yeah, he is already living here in the community, which was great. You know, housing is a challenge, but he and his wife were able to find a house, and so he's got his roots now in the community.
That's great. All right. Well, is there anything else that you would like to talk about today?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, awesome. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of really exciting community events are coming up. As always, I encourage folks to go to keenenh.gov/jobs. Check out some of the open positions there. There's a lot of really good ones. And if that's it, I think we will wrap up for today, and we will see you next time. Thanks for listening to City of Keene in Focus. We'll see you next time.